cathartic. Going back and trying to reminisce about different things and going back and fact checking and stuff. But yeah, cathartic. It was good to get a lot of stuff off my chest. It was. I knew it was going to be like that. Because there was some of the stuff that was kind of hard to put in there, and it kind of wavered back and forth here and there. But I'm going to tell my story, and that's the way it is. But yeah, it was definitely cathartic.
Well, we'll talk about the heavy moments as well, but it was fun for me because I was in school when you first started and covered your career, and it sure brought me back to a lot of those games, good and otherwise, while you were a Wildcat. But tell me about kind of reliving the high school days. You had a lot of fun in high school, but there was personal drama and things like that. What was it like going back that far, digging that deep?
Well, fortunately, we had, of course, my own thoughts. It's never going to escape me. But I had a friend of mine, a high school teammate of mine. He had a lot of newspaper articles from our junior and senior years. So as far as box scores and game stuff, like that. Of course, I remember a lot, especially the state tournament and stuff like that. But again, it was great to go back and think about those days and how good they were to me, and everything. But we worked on it a long time, but it was nice to kind of go back and think about those days and relive it, so to speak, in my head. And yeah, some of it was bad, but at the end of the day, it turned out really good. So, but yeah, it was a lot of fun thinking about this.
What was interesting to me, and I kind of remember this about you, was you were never one to seek the spotlight. You were never comfortable with that. You were a good guy to talk to because you were a good interview, but you weren't all about, hey guys, look at me. And that went back to your high school days, didn't it? Really, almost to your middle school days.
Oh yeah, that went back to when I started bat going for my dad in Little League, at 6 years old. But, I owe that to my parents. They never let us get a big head. They never let us think that we were the best thing since sliced bread or anything. They kept us grounded and humble, and everything. But I was quiet and shy growing up due to a lot of things. I had bad teeth growing up, so I was kind of embarrassed about that.
That was kind of a medical thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had pneumonia a lot growing up. I was hospitalized 7 times with pneumonia from the time I was born till I was 6. And high fevers. They thought that I wasn't going to make it a couple of times, that sort of stuff. But yeah, it discolored my teeth, so I was embarrassed about that. And I was just an introvert, I was shy and didn't know how to talk to people. And due to the tooth thing, I was always talk with my hand over my mouth, that sort of stuff. But that was something that, I had to deal with as well. But no, I never did like being in the spotlight. It just wasn't me. I knew all along that without my teammates or what have you, that it wasn't going to happen. So, but like I said, my parents kept us humble and grounded, and I shied away from that sort of stuff. I wasn't comfortable with it.
My son, who's now 32 and healthy, and he's in law enforcement, but he had pneumonia when he was little bitty.
Yeah.
But when I read that I never knew that about you. How would I know that you had pneumonia 7 times, and yet you became an incredible athlete? Literally against all odds, didn't you, when you were young and coming up through high school?
As a matter of fact, the doctor said that I would never be any kind of athlete at all because I just wouldn't have the lung capacity to, the stamina and stuff to go through that sort of stuff. And I think down deep, I know I was young and everything, but I think that kind of drove me to prove to people that I could do it. Because, I had my brother growing up an athlete, and everything, and going through everything that he did, and I wanted to keep pace. So my parents were very overprotective because of my illnesses and stuff, so it was just kind of in the back of my head, I got to prove myself, I got to prove myself all the time. And that's the way I lived my life, it was kind of reckless, but, I just wanted to be sure that people knew that it wasn't going to stop me. And it was kind of a medical miracle, so to speak, but, God had his hand in it, and he had a purpose for me, and it worked out great.
I don't want to give away the story because people need to read this book, Jay Shidler, The Blonde Bombers, that you and Paul Corio wrote. But I'll tell you, one of the chapters, one of the many times where I sat up straight, is when you talked about how in college you were something of a daredevil. I mean, you literally death-defying. And people are going to need to read the book to find out what I'm talking about. But when you look back on some of those chances you took, just messing around with your buddies, what do you think now?
That was crazy. I would never do it again in a million years. But again, going back to what I said about, as far as, proving myself and being accepted, I wanted everybody to like me and things. But, I would do stuff like that just to prove that I could do it. And I think I touch on in the book, I feel like I was the original hold my beer guy.
Yes.
Don't dare me to do anything because I'm more than likely probably going to try to do it. And successfully, that was the main thing. But yeah, I did a lot of dumb stuff, which we all do. But, I was just that side of me was in there, and I just wanted to, I took a lot of risks, but they say, no risk, no reward. But there was a lot of stupid stuff.
Well, the reward for you had to just all be up between your ears because no one's handing you any medals for doing that kind of thing. No. I got to thinking too when I was reading about your recruitment, and of course you were a super athlete coming out of high school, and you talked with people. Again, need to read this book to find out why you came to Kentucky and said no to everybody else. But I thought about that now against how things work today. You didn't have an entourage. Nobody did that back in the 70s.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you ever think about that. You've got the kids with a hat, display and all that. You basically just said, hey, I'm coming to Kentucky.
Yeah.
And it was just a different time, wasn't it?
It was totally different. There wasn't that big
publicity,
pomp and circumstance and all that kind of stuff, and publicity, of course. And it was just a day that media showed up and you said where you were going, and they took some pictures, and that was it. So there was no big blow up about it or anything. It was a kind of a quiet, casual kind of setting and everything. Totally different from nowadays.
Yeah. And you came to Kentucky, obviously, and played for Joe B. And you they take a deep dive into your relationship with Joe, which had its ups and downs.
Sure.
Which I got to think, was that painful to recount that? Because you write about how at times he looked after you, and at times he made life really hard on you. Mm-hmm. Harder than a lot of his other players. Yeah.
It was tough to think about it, because I've thought about it for 40 plus years now, and everything. And our relationship was good in my mind. I think that some of the things that Coach was doing was his way of maybe trying to motivate, but that's really not what I needed. So it was a little bit different trying to hash through that and kind of figure out what is he trying to do, what is he trying to say, that sort of stuff. But it was hard to think about and go back and reminisce about those kind of things. But I brought a lot of them on myself, but we had, I wouldn't call it a love-hate relationship, but we butted heads a few times. But I was just being me, and that's the only thing I could be. And Coach did the best he could, to try to get me to realize, and for the most part he did, But I was just glad that, in the end that we were able to kind of reconcile, and I really truly believe that we became close, real close over the last 4 or 5 years of his life. I'd go have lunch with him at the church, and talk, and I'd call him on the phone, and that sort of thing. So it ended up well, I think that we made amends, and I'm glad of that, grateful for that. So but it was quite an experience.
Talking to Jay Shidler, played at Kentucky from 77 to 1980, 4 seasons, which doesn't happen anymore, it seems like. But, you wrote about that your first team, your freshman team, that lost to North Carolina.
Yeah.
And I've said this to Kyle, although I'm like, Kyle, no offense, but I think that team, it might not have been better, but it played better than your 78 team. Because I felt like that team, as you point out, coming off the NIT championship, adding talent, you guys destroyed people. In 78, you played around with people before you put them on. That 77 team crushed people.
Yeah.
What was it like being a part of that?
Oh, it was great. I feel we had the best team in the country that year. And we were in the top 5 most of the year, and everything. But things happened, when we came across North Carolina. But I mean, it was a super team. You got Jack and James and Rick and myself and Larry Johnson and Mike. Forget about Mike.
Mike Phillips.
Yeah. And I've heard Jack say the same thing. That he thought that team was very, very good and could have won the national championship. So it would have been nice to have back to back. But it was great for me. Coming in as a freshman and being able to contribute and start with those guys and being as successful as we were. I was looking forward to trying to get back, get to the Final Four for the first time and everything. But I wouldn't take it back for anything. We had a nice team. We just, stumbled, went at the worst time, and probably, we could have won it, if they didn't make 35 out of 38 free throws or whatever it was. But hey, that's why they play the game.
I'm glad you brought up Mike Phillips. And half the time in the book, you call him Big Man. Your nickname for him. It was easy to see you all were close. And of course, you got suspended together.
Right. Sure.
But tell me about that relationship. And I knew Mike a little bit because he dated a friend of mine for a while.
Okay.
So he was a free spirit, not unlike yourself.
Right.
And it had to be terrible when you heard of his passing.
Oh, it crushed me. It crushed me. We were probably, I was closer to Mike than anybody else on the team. Maybe possibly Tim Stevens, because Tim and I roomed together the first year and a half. But Mike, I just kind of gravitated towards Mike, and being that I didn't have a car, he was my ride everywhere, games, practice, airport, wherever we had to go, and spend a lot of time with each other outside of that. But Mike was a great dude, man. I loved hanging around with him, and he was just a free spirit and a fun-loving guy. And of course, again, he was 6'10", so I knew if I was hanging with him, there wouldn't be any trouble had, So that was a bit of a.
And he was kind of a burly 6'10".
Yeah.
He wasn't any string bean.
Oh no, Mike was solid. And but it was so many good times with Mike. Him playing his guitar and he was great. We had such a good time and we played against each other in overseas at one time, which was really nice. I could have surprised him when we got to Spain and we hung out for the week that we were over there. And when I heard the news about Mike, it just crushed me because we had just kind of in the previous 2-3 years from then. We were just starting to kind of connect again, because he was in Madisonville and I was, of course, in Lexington. But we were talking on the phone and seeing each other at different events and stuff like that. So it was really nice to kind of get back close to him again. And as a matter of fact, I had just seen him, I think it was about 3 months before he passed at a signing. But it was a horrible day for me.
Well, and that brings me to really the beginning of your book and the end of your book. It's kind of a bookend, if you will, when you explain why you wrote the book. And you had kind of hit rock bottom. And you had posted a message on Facebook to explain that. And it really concerned your teammates. And again, without giving away the book, because people need to read this, but Jack and Kyle Macy became very concerned about you and paid a call. And you said they urged you to write a book and get this out. So that brings us back to the beginning of the interview when I said it was cathartic. How tough was that to hit rock bottom, but then you open the door and there are your friends looking after you?
Toughest moment of my life. I didn't know where else to go. I had hit rock bottom for the last time. I'd been there before and I'd struggled through it, and everything. But that day, I had sincerely had enough. And the next day, Jack and Kyle showed up and saved my life, basically. But while I was sitting there with them, they both looked me dead in the eye and said, "You need to write a book."
Really?
Yeah, because they knew some of the stuff that I had endured and gone through. They didn't know everything, but they were there, So they knew of some of the stuff, and they told me that they didn't know of anybody in the history of the program that had gone through as much as I had.
Right.
And they said people want to hear that, people want to know that, So that was the final nudge that I needed to go ahead and get with somebody to write the book. And I'm so glad that they showed up and so grateful they showed up that day. And I love them to death, man. Not only teammates, but they're great men and just class people. And they came to my rescue, and I'll never forget it.
You're very frank about that. You're frank about your relationship with Joe Hall. You're frank about the fact you didn't shy away from admitting, drug use, alcohol use, like a lot of college kids and then people beyond college.
It was the 70s,
Yeah, exactly. Was that difficult to admit to? I got to think it obviously helped you. But as you were typing and you and Paul were working out what was going into the book, you really laid yourself open.
I did, and I wanted it that way. I knew that there was going to be some things that I would put in there that people might be a little shocked about, surprised about, obviously didn't know about. But I just, I wanted to tell my story, and if I want to tell my story, I want everything to be in there. We didn't leave any stone unturned. There's so many things that has come to mind since the book that I was like, oh my gosh, I should have put that in there. But
next edition.
Right. But yeah, it was tough. It was not easy at all to put some of that stuff in there. But again, I mean, it's my story, and I wanted people to understand how it happened as it happened, and so I didn't have really any choice but to make it that way, and I wanted it that way. So I'm glad that we were able to relay those kind of things in the book.
How often did one memory unlock another one that maybe you hadn't thought about in years?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. I mean, we'd be going through something, and something would pop in, and like, oh wait, I got to tell you about this, that sort of thing. But that's just the way it was when Paul and I got together. Things started falling into place, and he was kind of amazed about some of the stuff I was telling him because he didn't know, a lot of stuff. But that's just the way I wanted it to be. I just wanted it to be a truthful explanation of my life. And I think that myself and Paul did a remarkable job in putting that in
It's a deep book, and this is not a criticism, but I found myself, especially in the games that you played in Kentucky that I covered, because it would prompt memories in me. Mm-hmm. But I would find myself saying, I would love to know more about that game or that week or whatever. But if you had done that, that book would have been 1,000 pages, right?
Yeah, it would have been, and that's why we were when we were into it. For cost purposes, as you might know, we wanted to keep it under 300 pages, right? And so we had to leave out some things and not include some things. But yeah, it's like I said.
Well, there's a lot to tell too, all start to finish.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. That since it's been out, I thought, oh gosh, this might be in there. And I've even mentioned to Paul before that there might be a after the ride kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? But we touched on everything pertinent. I felt that needed to be said, and we got that done, and I feel like we got a good product.
Let me double back to when you first got here. And of course, the name of the book is The Blonde Bomber, and the subhead is Ride. The Ride with Shide. Mm-hmm. And there's a story in that. Mm-hmm. But there's a story in the blonde hair, and somebody called you White Lightning, and it was not about the color of your skin, but the color of your hair.
Right.
But again, people need to read the book and give away the story. But it sounded to me like you kind of, for a guy who didn't like the spotlight, you were okay with that blonde bomber stuff, weren't you?
I was, once I kind of got used to it. I really wasn't aware of me being referred to that way for almost until the last few days of my high school career. I didn't read newspapers. So I just went about my business, and but that popped up at some point in time, in the latter part of my senior year, and then it followed me down here, of course, but down deep, I probably enjoyed that part of it. I'd be lying if I didn't. It was my moniker, and people related to that, and obviously I stood out. But it ended up being really nice, to have that, and here 40 years later, and I'm still referred to like that, and the funny thing about it is, Dick, that my hair was just that color 1 year.
Really?
Kentucky, at Kentucky.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. That's right.
Yeah. But, it stuck,
yeah.
and never to be able to get away from it now.
Well, and we talked about Coach Hall, and I thought it was great. One of the anecdotes you told was that Coach came to you at one point when you were kind of struggling with your shot, and your confidence. And I'm not going to give away how you got your confidence back, but he did ask you, would it help you to go back to coloring your hair? That seemed like the most un-Joe Hall thing I've ever heard.
He did suggest that. He knew I was struggling, was concerned that I was struggling, and I don't know on a whim or if he was really serious or whatever, but yeah, he did bring that up one day before practice, you know, and of course I shot it down real quick. I'm not Samson, you know, it doesn't have anything to do with my hair, you know, but yeah, it was kind of strange to me, you know, that he would suggest that, but he did do that, yeah.
You talked a little bit, and you didn't give away at all in the book about why Dwight Anderson left. I'm pretty sure I know why, but anyhow, but how good was he? Because he was the subject of a documentary not long ago and has since passed away. But you talk about a shooting star, a guy that burned bright and hot and then was gone.
Yeah.
But what was it like playing alongside a guy like a singular talent like Dwight Anderson?
Yeah. I had never seen too many people like Dwight when he came out of high school, when he came here. I mean, he was quick, he was fast, he could jump, he had a nice touch, you know, 12, 15 feet, he could take it to the rack. He was unlike anybody else we'd ever had, you know, that I played with. That versatile, you know, and everything, and all the talent in the world, and he proved that on the court. He was a little hard to deal with it sometimes, but you know, LeBron and those guys and the older guys kind of kept him in check, you know, as far as that's concerned. But he was a great talent, and I'm sorry it didn't work out here for him, you know, and everything. But he was definitely one of the better ones coming out of high school that I had seen at that point, and he took Kentucky by storm.
Absolutely, and I do remember the Stars